Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi. A very good afternoon to all, and a warm welcome for joining us today. Hi, I am Vera from UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute and unit within Singapore Management University. So some months ago, we had a chat with our counterpart, the Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center from Sasin School of Management. We expressed our interest to do a joint learning session with them to reach out to the SME communities, both in Singapore as well as Thailand. And that is how today's session, Sustainability for SMEs, the Why and the What, is arranged. And this is the first of a 4-part series that we have prepared for you. Through this series, we hope to leave with you a better understanding of the sustainability challenges and possibly how to overcome them. Okay, very quickly. Here is the program lineup for today. So we have a dialogue session, followed by a speaker session, and thereafter a panel discussion. So without further ado, first up, it will be a dialogue session between Dr. Ang Sasin from UOB SMU AEI and Mr. Surawat Sen from Yotin from Sasin SSC. They will be conducting a dialogue session to kick off today's session. So I will hand over to the both gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to our first of 4-part series on sustainability. And we are totally delighted to partner Sasin. It's a pleasure and an honor to partner Sasin.
Right. Likewise, pleasure is ours.
Then do you want to kickstart your introduction of what Sasin Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center is all about? Over to you.
Yes. How about if just before we jump into that, would you mind if we just briefly introduce our respective organizations?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So on our end, I'm the director of the Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center here in the Sasin School of Management. So our center does a lot of different things, actually, as you might suspect from even just the name. But just to highlight a few of the key things, we do advisory and consulting, we do incubation and acceleration, curriculum development, outreach, including events and workshops, and we also do research. And so on the advisory and consulting side, just want to say really briefly, that includes things like working with companies of many different sizes to enable them all the way up to the board level so that they can do sustainability reporting for themselves and to also help enable them to set their sustainability strategy. We also work with NGOs in multiple projects, a lot of multi-stakeholder initiatives. And then of course, incubation acceleration runs across the spectrum from deep tech to digital startups and to the sort of to impact ventures of all types, including social enterprise. And then a couple other things just to highlight briefly, we have some key things, events or programs. We have Asia's longest running global student startup competition called the Bangkok Business Challenge. We have Thailand's first deep tech accelerator program called Sprint. And I'll just leave it at that for now. So you can see it's a really, really broad spectrum of things that we do over here.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, sure. Over at our end, I'm Sir Kang. I'm the director of the UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute. We've been around for a while, since 2005. We are a tripartite collaboration between SMU, UOB, a local bank, as well as other SMEs who have actually given money to help other SMEs. So it's basically a pay forward kind of initiative, right? And it's been a great initiative. We actually serve the SME community in Singapore. And essentially, if you look at the core of what we do, is actually helping being involved in learning, right? The learning of our SMEs and the learning of our students. And one of our flagship product, our flagship service is actually helping SMEs learn about their business, their customers, and their industry through this thing called SME consulting program. So we actually get students who are trained in business and management, okay? and we actually have a advisor to handhold them for a 16-week program, and they will actually do solve business problems for SMEs. Now, through all our initiatives, we hope our SMEs become scientific and systematic in their way they approach management and business. And this is really what we are all about. And we've been doing it for the last 16, 17 years and still going very strong. So again, that's our biggest aspiration. Besides the SME consulting, we also do talks, seminars, and workshops. And this collaboration with Sasin is also one of the many things that we do at the Institute. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. So why don't I kind of kickstart by, Sam, you guys have been around doing sustainability for a while, right? And
Yeah.
this term sustainability means different things to different people. In fact, if you look at the current definition, it seems to be changing and evolving all the time. So for the benefit of our audience, right, and so to anchor and to kind of shape the thinking for the next couple of seminars, maybe it'd be good for us to share what sustainability means to Sasin, and I'll also kind of share my perspective. Do you mind?
Absolutely. That'd be a great place to start. This happens a lot in anything that's growing and evolving. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can cause a little bit of confusion. So even here, I'd like to, instead of doing, one of the things that I might normally do is talk about one of the sort of universal, quote unquote, or standard definitions historically, but instead, I'd like to share kind of the way that I've been looking at it through my own personal experience as we've gotten more and more involved with this. I'd put it really simply that the heart of it, as I perceive it, is that it's about thinking long-term rather than just short-term. If I'd really whittle it down, it's like thinking longer term, and in that, ensuring that you and your business and that first of all that you and your business are going to survive past this day, week, month, and year. And it's just so happens that you recognize, if you want to do that your survival even is dependent on that, on people and factors outside of yourself. And this is sort of one of the keys. So it's almost ironic, like even if you really are, for lack of a better term, very selfish, let's say, all right, but even then, your own livelihood is dependent on so many others. That includes your team, your partners, the board, investors, co-investors, your customers, of course, your suppliers, your surrounding community, your supply of natural resources, which comes from this planet, your government. So in a nutshell, it's stakeholders. So sustainability is about recognizing, first of all, that your own livelihood is tied to many other things beyond what you might be looking at just for the very, very short term. And so the thing is, the relationship with all these stakeholders is not linear. There's a lot of overlap, there's interdependence, there's complexity, and hence one of the things that one of the folks that are going to talk today is about sort of systems thinking. Is to grasp all of this, you need to think in a less linear way, so to speak. And doing things the old way as sort of an afterthought or a one-off project, which is actually like what a lot of projects or CSR used to be like, that's not effective in the long run. And in other words, it's not sustainable. So to be effective, you've got to do something you consider as early as possible, and you gradually develop it. And even like many other things in business, if you really want to be effective in it, you need to be able to measure it. And there's all this discipline that goes behind that. So I'll sort of leave it at that for now. So the key punchline is sort of long-term, you want to survive, but that is dependent on many things around you.
Thanks. No, over at our end, I think similar, and again with the changes in definition, I think it's actually important to go back to the reason why sustainability has been much talked about and much debated over the last couple of years. And again, sustainability actually is quite different in different industries as well, and I think the opportunity for all of us, whether you're a big company or a small company, particularly if you're a small company, ironically, right, is this opportunity to transform, right, based on the market opportunity, that human beings are actually realizing that we cannot sustain the current way we are producing stuff in the old way of industrial revolution, right? We keep taking and taking and taking, and it's not going to be able to sustain the way we. Now there are also issues such as the explosive growth of number of people in the world, for example. So by one estimate, right, it's estimated that by 2030, the world population will actually reach 5 billion from 2.5 in 2015. And that actually creates a lot of stress on the resources that we have. Water is one, carbon emission is one, and all kinds of natural materials that you need from the earth. And that, if we do not embrace sustainability, then the current way we live and the current way we produce is going to be at risk. So that's really another perspective. And I think the definition calls for you not only to think about thinking about your future in a long-term basis, but also understand that sustainability doesn't mean that you have to go and do something totally different from what you have been doing. So I think that's really important to understand, because sustainability doesn't necessarily mean that you have to kind of put everything on its head, right? Now, of course, depending on what kind of industry you're in, your cycle may be a bit longer. Okay, for some industry, they are capital intensive. It takes you a bit more time because it needs you to kind of have your old investments, right, work its way through. Okay, but some tech companies, particularly the startups that we see in the market, the process of pivoting and getting into sustainability is actually much shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's right.
So these are a couple of few points that I kind of want to bring out on sustainability. Okay. Now, of course, very often, and I think Sam, you agree with me that sustainability gets confused with CSR, and it's different from environmental sustainability. And what does it mean to be sustainable? Does it mean that only being focused on CSR you will get sustainability?
No, not necessarily. So first of all, the way that CSR, particularly traditionally it was practiced, it's again quite short term. It's something that people do as sort of a one-off, or not many times. It's done as an afterthought, as an add-on. And I think one of the keys of sustainability is that it's something that is baked in, it's integrated into what you do. It informs and can even you can even enhance your own strategy and what you're doing fundamentally in your business. So you do it, ideally you do it from the beginning, and it evolves over time and you develop. So once again, it goes back to, it's a long-term process that you keep doing, rather than what our senior advisor, Alex Mavro, likes to say. It's not a project. Sustainability is not a project.
It's a way of life.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, if I were to throw you this definition, which is kind of like an open-ended kind of definition, this definition basically says that sustainability all boils down to building a more ethical, profitable company. Now, does it encompass a fair bit of what you think sustainability means?
Interesting. So that this is a really interesting thing for me, because from sort of, let's say, my own personal opinion, and for a lot of us in this space, it is like that. It can be like that, and that's good. But it's a delicate thing, because, and this is part of why I explained it the way I did earlier, not everyone out there prioritizes the ethics on a let's say on a large scale or scope outside of themselves, right? But pretty much everyone does still care about their business or what they're doing. And the interesting thing is sustainability, even without the emphasis on the ethics side, right? It's on the other parts, on whether it's profit, revenue, cost reduction, risk mitigation, reputation, all these positive business things, they're all in there. And it's really important, because many people misunderstand that it's almost like they're mutually exclusive. In other words, sustainability is doing good and doing good is a cost and the cost is not good for your business. That's wrong. If you do it right, especially according to best practices, you can achieve these other things independent of the ethics.
Yep. And I think building on that definition, in a layman way, sustainability can actually be thought about running a successful business without messing up the place we live for
That's
our
great.
kids, right? And that's
Yes,
quite interesting way of kind of putting it, right? And in this respect, you need to respect the community in which the business operates in. And
that's
it's
right.
a partnership, a long-term partnership, right? You have with the community, and that's how sustainability should be looked at.
That's right. That's right. This is wanted to add actually even just a little bit there. Yeah, there's a gentleman named Bob Willard. He's an ex-senior manager from IBM, and he was like and he's also a leading expert now in quantifying sustainability. And again, he emphasized that yes, absolutely, sustainability does result in doing good, of course, but very much it helps businesses capture opportunities and to mitigate risks. So he's done extensive research. So this is really highly quantified, and he showed that let's say an SME, let's say a company of 6 employees, about $1 million in revenue, if when they employ these sort of best practices, sustainability approaches, they can typically increase profit by at least 51% within 3 to 5 years, and that like they can
Wow.
achieve benefits, like 7 different benefits that you outline. Revenue can increase by about 9%, energy reduction 75%, waste I think is about 20%, reduction of materials 10%, increase in productivity 2%, and reduction of turnover, of employee turnover 25%. And on top of all that, reduce potential profit erosion between 16 to 36% due to mitigating and reducing risks. So again, there's all this good stuff baked into there. And this is even specifically for an SME.
Yeah. But I think moving on to the SME, I think one of the questions that our SMEs usually have is like, isn't sustainability and CSR for the big companies? They would have the resources to do all these things, right? We are SMEs. We probably will not be able to make a difference, right? Now, what do you say to that? And it's not quite a common misconception, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I would say it's not the case. It's definitely not just for big business. Case in point, before even talking about sustainability, keep in mind that SMEs drive our economy. They might think when they look at themselves individually as small, but that impact is massive, massive collectively. But then on a micro level and regarding the sustainability, no, they don't need because I think the assumption that might be built in the way they say that could be the assumption that they need massive resources to be able to do quote unquote CSR. But again, if they sort of revisit the actual mindset, the actual application, they'll find, nope, you don't have to spend a lot of resources. And ironically, when you do it right, you actually end up reducing use of resources and saving money. And so it's all about the details of how you do it rather than, don't jump to the conclusion that it's got to be something you've got to do with massive resources and you've got to spend a lot on.
Yes, and I think one of the things I've learned recently is if you actually adopt new farming techniques, for example, in the frontier countries around us, the feeds that you're going to buy is likely to be more costly now. But because the feeds that you use, right, is more effective and it
Yep,
pollutes the water less, and therefore your fish will actually grow bigger and you get better yield. Now, of course,
exactly.
the immediate consequence of adopting sustainability will seem that you are actually spending more money. Your cost has gone up. But
Right.
then again, in the longer term, right, if the water is actually better and your yield can actually go up, you could
Mhm.
actually make a lot more profit, as you mentioned, right, than otherwise.
Exactly. And what you just said that's just perfect because again, notice that one of the key things there is about a long-term versus, short-term versus a medium or long-term perspective. And this isn't even specific or exclusive to sustainability, right? A good, effective business person, this is a common thing. You make R&D investments, you make capital investments that in the short term may be a hit to you, but they're worth it, and they'll put you in a very strong leadership position because of what happens after that. So it's no different from that basic fundamental business logic.
Yes. And I think to build on that one, I think the specific tangible benefits of adopting sustainability, especially for SMEs, you get investors, right, to invest in your company, okay? And it's a growing pot of money on supporting companies that are that adopts or embrace sustainability practices. You also sustain support from customers, right? Leading to ongoing revenue from customers.
That's right.
And also you get the license to operate and grow from society as a whole, and being
Yes.
a very good corporate citizen. So it's a fair bit of win-win-win. And then I guess if you look at for the point of view of an SME particularly, right, you're always resource stretch, you're always on the lookout for capital. And I think that actually will be a benefit that SMEs need to kind of look at.
That's right. Absolutely. And what you just listed, that's still a couple of the sort of like some of the cream, so to speak. There's still more. There's a long list of things, you know, it goes all the way to even attracting talent, attracting employees, retaining them, getting your branding impact, and all sorts of things. It's just all over the place. Tons and tons of positive impact.
So in this seminar, just to do a bit of advertisement, we are actually going to have a few speakers, right? We will actually be sharing with you how do you set it up, right? How to do it, and in some sense, you need to start from the top, right? All the way from the board to the shop floor, right?
Yes.
And that's one way. Now, the other seminar will also deal with the question on measurement. Now, unless you're able to measure, how do you know whether you've achieved certain outcomes or not, right? So our speaker and our panelists will actually share with you how to actually go about doing it, right? Okay, and measuring it. The last seminar will actually talk more about getting people who has actually experienced to share firsthand knowledge, right, on how to set it up and what are the things to look out for, right, to help you to get this benefit, you know, as you go along your program. Okay, so that's what all this thing is all about. And I earnestly hope that all of you will stick with us for the next couple of seminars to learn more about how do you actually get this thing going.
Yes, it's a wonderful, wonderful lineup, and you'll get so many different views and perspectives, and it will be, it's the real thing. It's not all academic. These are real practitioners who've done it.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess in some sense, right, sustainability is not if, it is when. And I guess
Yes.
in some sense, the tipping point, right? We will hit a tipping point, and we know whether we've hit a tipping point if we have no more debates about the relevance of ESG.
Mhm.
I think that's really what we are looking for. And again, in some sense, right, in the past, we've also been reliant on government as well as NGOs, you know, United Nations to kind of spearhead this thing. Now, the reality, right, is that the market forces, right, can be a powerful agent for positive societal changes. And I think all businesses, right, have a responsibility to kind of step up to it, right, so
That's
that we
right.
kind of live in a better world.
That is correct.
Yeah. And I think one of the perspective is, of course, it's not the only one that we have in the market. Is that there are essentially four buckets people can put sustainability in. One's environmental stewardship. Okay. The other one is societal responsibility. Okay. Governance is also one big one. How do you run the shop, right? How do you run the place? And the strategy and execution.
That's
So
right.
the four meat bucket, right? People tend to put sustainability in.
One brief comment, because you mentioned about startups, and you also mentioned investors. So briefly, is that very interesting to note. Only recently, within the past year or so in our region, we've been seeing major regional venture capitalists put ESG in place. So there are people who are responsible and dedicated looking at this, and it's an important filter. So even in the tech startup ecosystem, if you're not starting to get savvy about these things, you can be filtered out of investment opportunities. So very, very important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think from my experience speaking with VCs and from my own investment experience, there has been a big push towards sustainable investing, and has been big. In fact, if you look at millennials, your future customers, right? They are
Mhm.
really big on this sustainability initiative, and I
That's right.
think all businesses need to get interested in making sure that they actually engage, right? Your customers, you engage your suppliers, you engage your investors, right? In
Yes,
this conversation, because it's
exactly.
all encompassing. It's not
That's right.
something that you want to start, but you just want to do it for yourself, right? So it actually involves really making sure that you talk to your suppliers and their customers as well, and to
That's right.
understand what's really making them tick in this respect.
That's right.
Okay, sounds like a lot of work, I think, but I think if you kind of set it up right, and I guess you will actually be hearing from the panelists, and you can ask questions with the panelists who have actually gone through this journey, right? In order for you to kind of know what are the blind spots you need to avoid. Okay, so I see Vera, so I think Vera is going to tell us enough, right? Your time is up.
No, no, no. Thank you so much, Sam and Dr. Ang, for this sharing. We have one question from the audience by Daniel Go. Many reasons for sustainability, and one of the reasons, is it due to corporate failure, as in, be it listed or non-listed companies? That's the question being asked. Any of you would like to take this on?
Okay, why don't I take a quick stab at it, right? Now, corporate failure, if you kind of look at this, right, it's kind of a negative way of looking at it. It came out of something you need to fix. It's more reactive than proactive. And it's the way I see it. Now, if you look at the glass half full, right, that shouldn't be the case, right? It's not respond to some corporate failure or debacle that resulted in this, but the fact that there's actually an opportunity, right, for all of us that came out of this huge disconnect between demand and supply. Now, if you imagine, right, that if the world population is doubling in by 2030, right, the amount of consumer goods that you need to produce, right, and the materials that you need, it's going to be phenomenal. Okay, so if you take the active step and not wait and to look for new materials, new way of creating product that is not going to damage the environment, you'll be in the forefront of the changes that's going to come, or the transformation that's going to come in the marketplace. Okay, and again, big companies are not the only ones doing it, right?
Right.
Small companies should actually be doing it. So that's really my take on this, Daniel.
I love the way Dr. Sirkang, the way you said that, because it's really important that we see it's not only about fixing things, but the more you dive into the sustainability stuff, you'll see that there's an entire universe of creating and innovating new things that are pluses. And it's part of the fun, actually, honestly. There's an innovation and creativity in it. You'll see a lot of this in circular economy and systems thinking. So yeah, it's multi-sided.
Yeah, and I just maybe want to share with you something on the kind of stuff in the financial services. So you've seen impact investing is one of the area. You also seen things like responsible investing, and this has kind of changed my perspective in my life as well. I know that it's not earth shaking or whatever, but over time, right, because I've been exposed to ideals or concepts of sustainability, I've also been practicing it. So these days when my banker tells me, hey, Dr. Ang, this casino is undervalued, right? Would you like to invest in them? And the answer now is no. I don't support these. I don't support companies that damage the environment. So I don't invest in traditional energy. And what am I going for? I'm going for clean tech. I'm going for things that's going to protect the environment, because that's my bet, right? Okay, and I'd like to leave a legacy in terms of keeping the environment clean. Now, as I was looking at some of the products that's in the market, I stumbled upon one really interesting one, which is UBS Future of the Earth Fund. Okay, something like that. And Wellington Asset Management also has a global impact fund. And that really, so you just imagine the amount of money that's been put aside, right, to support initiatives such as sustainability and doing good for the environment. Okay, any more questions?
All right, thank you so much. There's actually one more question, but we'll save it to the later when we do a Q&A session. All right, so thank you so much, Sam and
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
and Dr. Ang for this sharing. Thank you. Oh, something went wrong with my slide. Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, let us introduce to you Mr. Sander Fleuren from Moss Consultants and Capital. Sander is going to share with us an introduction to systems thinking, basically the holistic approach to what sustainability is all about. Okay, and you could ask Sander, where is he now? I think all of us will be so jealous, yeah, at his location. Sander, please.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sasin, SEC, and UOB SMU for inviting me to be here. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got a few slides for my bit. Let's see, get the right one. Okay. So as just mentioned, my name is Sander Fleuren. I'm the managing director of Moss Consultants and Capital. We're a consultancy that helps businesses tackle complex societal problems through systems thinking approaches. Now, I understand that probably none of that makes sense to you right now. Hopefully in 30 minutes, you'll feel very differently about that. My background is in academia as a researcher on corporate philanthropy, a lecturer on social entrepreneurship, and a learning and development manager for the executive education department of the Rotterdam School of Management in the Netherlands. But I've also spent more than 10 years now advising social entrepreneurs across Australia, Southeast Asia, Europe, and parts of Africa. And the last 3 years of which have been through specifically the lens of systems theory. Do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and maybe mention this event in your invitation so I know where I know you from. There's a link here to my profile in these slides, and these slides will be available to you afterwards. So I'll make sure you have them. So don't worry about any of that. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's do it. It's happening. Sam and Dr. Ang, I think, did a really good job of explaining what sustainability is, as well as some of the amazing associated benefits and potential pitfalls for SMEs. But just to drive the point home, climate change, for example, is happening. So if you look at sustainability, if we take maybe a smaller scope and look at environmental sustainability, well, climate change is happening. Those are one of the drivers. And the world is awakening to it, as they've explained. And the role of the private sector is becoming more and more important in both a contributor to climate change, but also as the sector that can help tackle climate change. So in other words, sustainability, whether it's environmental sustainability or social responsibility, is happening whether you like it or not. And here are some well-known examples of businesses that have proactively embraced sustainability in some form or shape and disrupted their industries. So you probably recognize a few of these, maybe not all of them. But these are organizations that have just changed the way a lot of these industries are now functioning, the structures underneath those industries. And I also have a few examples of more local social enterprises and SMEs in this region that are fighting the good fight, so to speak. One of which, Jazzberry CM Organic, you'll hear from later in the next part. But the bottom line is that businesses across the world are realizing that it's good business to be sustainable. So those who adopt and adapt, they win. Those who don't, they struggle to adjust and they have to catch up to the new rules of the game. And potentially, as Dr. Ang mentioned, potentially long-term, if you don't catch up, you might become obsolete because it's not sustainable as we expand as a population in this limited globe with planetary boundaries. So just an anecdote, Tesla, for example, we can debate about how sustainable they are in terms of their production lines. And as a company, they're certainly not net zero. But as a disruptor, we can be very clear about that. I'm watching the Euro 2020. I'm sure many of you are. I'm streaming it through British television. And when I look at the advertisements on that every night, it doesn't matter which car company it is that the ad is for, but they're all about their electric vehicle now. So that's a major disruption that came about very much with the rise of Tesla. But how did we get to this point, right? So how did sustainability become such a disruptive force in the private sector? Now, this has been slightly covered already by Sam and Dr. Ang, but just as a basic visual overview of it, I thought I'd start off with kind of a rough historical overview. This is about sustainability in organizational theory and practice. Now, mind you, I do write corporate sustainability. That's just because that tends to be the terminology used in organizational theory, but it really is about any business, any size of business, as Sam mentioned. Be mindful that this applies to startups as well as to SMEs, as well as to big multinational organizations. So I don't really have the time to go through all of it, but the idea that you can gather from this is that it's been around for a while. Actually, this idea of sustainability in business. Actually, in essence, the first known publication on CSR is from the 1950s when it was first used. So the idea that a business needs to do more than generate profit has been around for a while, and it's been picking up pace. And it started with more of a charitable or sort of defensive approach, where often the results that companies took were to create corporate foundations, which are in essence branded charities. And let's say in terms of an example of your carbon footprint, those kinds of foundations would make donations to rainforests and so forth as the positive thing that they were doing. That's relatively inactive. It moved towards more promotional with one-off sort of CSR initiatives, like Bike to Work Day, for example. And now, since the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, it's become a little bit more strategic. Right? We started to focus on how can you create value for the company and for the planet or society. So we're looking at concepts like ESG and Porter's creating shared value on how to create sort of innovation pipelines. An example of doing that would be to set net zero targets, right? So make it part of the DNA of your company. What's very interesting is that what we're actually moving towards to now in this very recent phase is the systemic approach to sustainability. And that's quite a new way of thinking about corporate sustainability. Basically, it's understanding business, that a business is essentially an organism that sits within an ecosystem, and that it therefore plays a crucial role in maintaining that ecosystem rather than just leeching off of it. Okay, so if we could just quickly do a mental exercise, we don't have time to, I think, listen to people, but just in your minds as a mental exercise right now, I want you to consider your business and think about where you might be on this list, in this table. What kind of sustainability approach might you currently be using? Where do you think your competitors are? What about your partners, your suppliers, or your clients? And are you just thinking about your country or your region? What about the business you do overseas? So what about your partners in Europe or America or Australia? How are they moving along this curve? And that's, I think most people who've done a business background will know the innovation adoption curve, like a bell curve. And think of, if you know that, maybe try to position yourself there too. Are you an innovator in sustainability? Are you an early adopter? Are you part or of the late majority, early or late majority, or are you a laggard right now? Just to kind of build a little bit the FOMO here, I guess. Where are you when it comes to business sustainability? Try to just anchor yourself in that as we move forward. Okay, so my job today is to introduce you to this last type of, so to speak, corporate sustainability. So specifically to the systems thinking mindset that underpins this approach. So systems thinking has many interesting aspects to it that I can talk about for hours, but because of the limited time, I'm going to focus on one fundamental principle that underlines this type of approach. And it's probably the most important one, and that's interconnectedness. And I think this quote captures that very well. It also gives what I believe is a glimpse into perhaps, the reason behind Da Vinci's genius. He was able to see things differently. He was able to see things as interconnected, which led him to amazing innovations that others couldn't have imagined because they saw things as independently, siloed. So systems thinking is about learning to see like Da Vinci, learning to see holistically in order to unlock powerful insights into the way the world works. Okay, so I want you to think back to January 2020, right? Roughly a year and a half ago. Where were you? What were your plans for the year? Think back. What were you going to do? What were you going to achieve in 2020? What were you looking forward to? And then what happened? Right? COVID, right? COVID-19 demonstrated most severely and most clearly to everyone how interconnected the world really is. So in that sense, it's made my job a little bit easier. But nobody, not even flat earthers, can deny that globally our economic systems are highly interdependent as we watch that virus spread through trade and travel networks globally. But we also can't deny anymore how interconnected economic systems are with other systems. So the virus laid bare the interdependencies between economic systems, healthcare systems, social systems, environmental systems, and even in some places, or in many places, political systems. And I think that this figure kind of says it all. So it's from a scientific article that's published in June 2020. And what you see here is a map of the impact of COVID on different systems. And it shows that a systems perspective helps to understand how everything is connected. So you can see economic systems here, health systems here, social systems here, environmental systems here, and you can see that they're actually all interconnected. So everything is connected. Systems are part of even larger systems and are made up of smaller systems. And it's their interrelationships, how they're connected, that leads to sort of this fluctuation, these dynamics that change and move over time. And so that means that there's no linear processes in the real world, right? They're nonlinear. You look at this figure, there's not a single linear process you can find in this. All I see is loops, right? Circularity. So applying a systems perspective or having a systems thinking mindset means seeing the world in this way. Did I just go backwards? Yeah, okay. So don't worry if you struggle with that, right? You might not see the world that way. And don't worry if you struggle with that. We're all conditioned to see things in terms of linearity, in terms of linear dichotomies. That's how we're conditioned. That's how the systems are currently structured. Right now, our education systems teaches us how to think deductively, how to think in linear processes. So we think that we think internal, external, us, them, me, you, developed countries, developing countries, economic system, environmental system. Or how about this one? For-profit business, social business, right? We tend to think of things in dichotomy. And that's maybe one of my pet peeves. And Sam touched on that as well, is that, it's not that we're doing business, they're doing social business. No, we're all doing business, but some of us are destroying more value than that we are creating. So, and that's probably because, we're not aware of it because we don't see the systems that we're part of, or because we're not yet being held accountable for that value destruction. But adopting a systems mindset, don't worry if you don't have it yet, that takes time. You're conditioned not to think this way. It takes practice. It's like exercising a muscle. And I'd like to exercise that a little bit together. Again, just by yourself, but go through this exercise with me. I want you to think how your business is connected to the following. So how is your business connected to your mode of transportation? How do you get to work? Right? Is that helped by your business? Does your business have policies that sets makes it easier to think maybe from an environmental perspective to move using public transport. So how's your business connected to your mode of transportation? Maybe your business funds your car. Maybe you got a car. Maybe you got a lease car, right? In the Netherlands, which is where I'm from, I believe there's a law that states that all companies have to provide annually a budget to employees to either purchase a bicycle or to use public transportation. And businesses do that. So how is your business connected to your mode of transportation? That's on the personal level. But then let's think a little bit bigger. How's your business connected to plastic pollution in local bodies of water? What are you doing now as a company? Maybe you're directly involved with producing plastic. Maybe you're directly involved with consuming it. Maybe all your workers order takeout every day for lunch, all your employees. Or you're indirectly supporting the petrochemical industry. There might be a lot of you out there that say, well, I'm a technology company. Yeah, but technology runs on energy, right? You need electricity. So are you indirectly supporting a petrochemical industry? Let's take one more step. What about on a global level? How's your business connected, for example, to European climate regulations? Most of you probably agree with this little blurb here at the bottom. It isn't. Oh, wait. Actually, maybe it is. Shell, I don't know if you heard, but Shell was recently in a Dutch court forced to meet their climate objectives. They have to by law now reduce their climate impact 49% by 2030 or 2040. And that sort of set a precedent because it means that globally businesses can start to become accountable or held accountable for global climate policies. So the same could happen to you, right? So you are in some way connected to that. So as you can see, there are always linkages to be found, depending on how far you zoom in or out. So at what scale, basically, you're looking at systems. And by practicing this mindset, you're going to see more clearly the different systems that your business is connected to and how they're independent. So now, can you really, for example, claim that your business is not dependent on the ecological systems of this planet? Probably not, If you zoom out far enough, you've got to admit, I'm part of this planet. So there's no such thing as a siloed business. A business's relationships and connections within and between systems and at different levels, whether it's local, global, that's what matters. Just like in real life, right? It's not the relationship, it's not the things that matter, it's the relationships, it's the connections that matter. All right. So this is echoed in the latest scientific literature, also in organizational theory. So here's an example in the Journal of Management Studies. It's published in November 2020. And it's on the business management lessons of COVID-19. And it emphasizes specifically the need for applying a systems perspective in business sustainability. It states that managers have to move from a firm level perspective to one that also considers the broader socio-ecological context. And I want to take this a little bit more further into corporate sustainability or business sustainability and using the SDGs. Now, you might have heard of them. There are 17 sustainable development goals set by the United Nations. And what we often see is that the SDGs are adopted with a linear mindset. So again, not really your fault because that's how you're conditioned to think, but they're adopted in a linear mindset. You look at it like you would look at it in this figure. And many organizations will consider the SDGs in this way and then select the ones that are the most applicable to their business. But seeing them as separate goals misses the greatest value of the SDGs, which is finding ways to leverage their interconnections. Again, the relationships, because actually, this is how the SDGs work in reality. In reality, they're not separate goals. They're not separate targets. They're actually interdependent challenges. So at its core, that's what systems thinking is about. It's from moving from a linear independent thinking to circular interconnected thinking. And systems thinking suggests that there are different elements in a system, such as your business actions on the one hand and societal outcomes on the other hand. And it suggests that these are interconnected. Now, as an approach, it's bigger than that, and there are lots of fundamental tenets, but this is the essence of it that I want you to internalize today. If there's one thing you walk away with today and practice from now on, I hope that it's trying to see how everything is interconnected, or how everything is connected. So now that we have a bit of an understanding of this fundamental principle of systems thinking, the question then is, what are the business implications of this approach for corporate sustainability? And as this quote signifies, I think the implications are relatively important, maybe even extreme. And the implications are extreme because for most businesses, it does require a fundamental shift in the business mindset, or in the mindset that underpins its structures and processes. So in other words, the way you do business. A business can no longer be seen as separate from its socio-ecological context, which means that linear strategies that ignore these realities are no longer useful, but are more likely to be damaging to the business and ultimately to society. Because businesses are also dependent on systems, that implies that the organization needs to have a holistic view of all the ways in which it is connected to these systems. So businesses need to understand, how am I connected to all these systems that I'm part of and that I depend on? And being embedded and dependent also means that a business becomes responsible for the performance or the health of socio-ecological systems. Wow, that's a game changer, right? Before, you were only responsible to your shareholders. Now, you're going to be responsible for the performance of socio-ecological systems that you depend on. There's a whole bunch of other things that you need to look at. So the value your business creates and the value your business destroys in these systems becomes central to assessing business performance. And that's the direction we're headed. So there's an adage, the same old thinking, the same old results. A systems approach to sustainability requires a holistic way of thinking to generate systemic results. So it's going to require a new way of understanding your business in the greater context. And this is how the 21st century of business is starting to shift the rules of the game that will define the global business landscape before we get to the 22nd century. So the movement started last century, inspired by activists and visionaries like John Lennon, for example, but it's been gaining momentum in the last couple of decades, and it's moving ahead. And as Dr. Ang said, there's going to be a tipping point if we haven't already started to reach that tipping point. And it's going to be easier for those who've started, harder for those who haven't, but it's definitely going to leave behind those who don't or won't. And perhaps the best way to make the business implications clear to you is maybe through a case example to show what the practical implications are of adopting this approach to corporate sustainability. So I want to kind of share a case example with you now. Let's look at a case of a company that, in my opinion, is very much active in this systemic space of corporate sustainability. It's called Interface. Now, Interface is a global commercial flooring company. It's headquartered in the US. It makes carpet tiles and resilient flooring. So vinyl tiles, rubber flooring, carpets, so forth. Their mission is to commit to running the business in a way that's restorative to the planet, right? It creates a climate fit for life. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, the reason I like this case or this company so much is that it's essentially a company that makes B2B products on a global scale by exploiting socio-ecological resources. So it's not a case of like a solar panel manufacturer or a plastic waste recycler, et cetera, et cetera. I think everyone can go, okay, yeah, those are good businesses for the planet and so forth. But here you've got a flooring manufacturer, right? It's the type of company that most people will assume is damaging the planet. I just want to navigate their website in the couple of minutes that we have left. Let me just check my timer. In the couple of minutes that I've left, just so we get a quick feel for what it means to move towards a systemic approach. Let's click out of this. I'll just switch to. So this is their website. Okay, and on their homepage, what we can see very clearly here is they're a for-profit business, right? They have an inviting product portfolio right off the bat. It's all about their design. It's about their, basically their pipeline, their products. It's about products, technical design, and so forth, right? This is a for-profit company, clearly. Revenue is important. But then you quickly see that they put really a lot of central focus and attention on sustainability, right? You've got that tab at the top, and at the bottom here, you've got sort of creating a climate fit for life. You've got their mission, their vision. So that's represented by their founder, Ray Anderson. Now, we don't have time to go into their full story. I'm going to click on it anyway, but we don't have time to go through all of it. But I would definitely invite you to check it out because it shows very clearly what it takes to change company structures and mindsets towards sustainable business. In essence, the company decided in the 90s that it was going to have no negative environmental impact by 2020. Now, that's still a strategic approach to corporate sustainability, not systemic, that's strategic. But it was in the 90s, and that was well ahead of its time. So to get a brief idea of that kind of a process and what that takes, even to get to the strategic side, we can look at their journey here. So their first moonshot to mission zero, right? It's becoming net zero. And if we go through this journey, you see some really interesting things. It highlights, to me, a lot of the innovation and the opportunities that Sam and Dr. Ong were talking about, that by becoming a leader in sustainability, you become a leader in your field as well, in terms of the kinds of products you can develop, in terms of becoming more transparent and communicating. Because you can see here that actually what they do a lot is they communicate with other parties as well of what they're doing with all their stakeholders. They break ties with people they want to break ties with companies that are doing negative influence on their mission, right? And ultimately, we can see that there's an enormous amount of value creation opportunities to get to the strategic corporate sustainability. So they achieved their goal in 2019, but even by then, they'd already realized that not having negative impacts wasn't enough. They realized that they needed to contribute to the overall performance of the socio-ecological systems in which they operate. So they defined a new mission or moonshot that they called Climate Takeback, to be regenerative by 2040. And that's a systemic approach to corporate sustainability. I was gonna play this video, but yeah, it's 40 seconds, but I don't think I shared the sound. So I'll let you watch it on your own time. I think I want to leave with sort of an insight into this because there was this mention in the earlier part today that, you know, it can take a long time, or, you know, it's not for everybody. And, you know, it's true, there is some nuance to this. So I was listening to one of the managers of Interface recently, and he described what moving from a strategic corporate sustainability to systemic corporate sustainability would mean for them. And he said that despite all that they learned and changed as a company to become strategic and become net zero, they now have to tackle the company drastically again to reach this new mission. So to do that, they're exploring systems, concepts, and innovations from much broader fields of science and technology, and it's quite exciting. So take biology, for example, right? They're learning about natural carbon sinks. For example, a forest is a natural carbon sink, right? It absorbs carbon. So they employ what we call biomimicry concepts. That means they mimic biological concepts to set targets. When they build a factory, when Interface builds a new factory, they benchmark its social ecological performance against the forest next to it. Can you imagine that? That means that they're saying this new factory that we've built has to become as regenerative for the local socio-ecological systems as this forest is. It has to provide the same benefits. Imagine all the valuable innovations that are going to come out of this process. So when you look at Interface's timeline, it's clear that leadership in business sustainability leverages competitive advantages. So it can be intimidating, but let the last thing that he told me be motivating, which is that when they started, they had no idea how to do it. They had to find out along the way, and it took them a long time to get there. And that might be the same with you. The only thing that he said was important is that you have to be willing and eager to change your mindset. You have to be willing to change your business structures. You have to be willing to create new metrics, to look at things differently. And you have to be willing to take your partners and your stakeholders with you on that journey, to let them understand your new approach in order to reach these types of objectives. So I hope that this has inspired you to consider or reconsider the role of your company, or that your company plays in socio-ecological systems. Now, MOS, like I said in the beginning, is a consultancy that helps businesses do this with systems thinking approaches. And if you're interested in finding out more about us, check us out. All the links are here. You'll be able to do that, no problem. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sander. And I believe we are now more aware that sustainability is definitely here to stay, and the interlinked relationships that businesses have must have, or rather, with the socio-ecological systems. Yeah. So thanks, Sandals. And there's a question for you, Sandals, but we will leave it to the Q&A session later on. Thank you. And now, allow me to share my slides once more. Okay, now, in this final segment of today's webinar, we have invited Ms. Ponita Pami Wong from Jazzberry Rice, as well as Mr. David Chen from Golden Sunland, Singapore, to discuss how they have actually incorporated sustainability practices into their respective businesses. And this session will be facilitated by Rafael from Sasin SEC. Rafael, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just find myself on the screen. And my fellow speakers. Okay. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Rafael Strauss. I work with the Sasin Sustainability Entrepreneurship Center as a content strategy manager. And I'm very, very happy to now run you through the segment which we call the practitioner's view. So today we have two co-founders of companies with sustainability at its heart, both operating within the rice business, if I may say. With us are Palmi and David. And yeah, I would like to start off the session with asking you kindly to introduce yourself, your business, and maybe your business philosophy in some short sentences. Palmi, would you like to go first, maybe?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Palmi. Thank you for having me here. So I co-founded a social enterprise called Jazzberry in 2011 with the goals to solve farmers' poverty and bring innovative and healthy, delicious products to the global consumers. So we are now working with over 2,500 organic small-scale farmers in the most impoverished part of Thailand, increasing their incomes by about 14 times. We are now still in the process of expanding our products, Jazzberry Rice, to the market worldwide so that we can increase our social impact with the farmers that we work with. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Please go ahead, David.
Hi, so I think I want to start by saying a very big thanks to the organizer for having two rice producers on the panel today, because rice is really a key staple to half of the global population, but it is also an extremely underrated crop that is both a contributor and victim of climate change. So a great example with regards to sustainability. So my name is David. I'm a father to a 3-year-old girl, and my son is scheduled to arrive anytime. So if I leave this room, I'm going to welcome him. So I co-founded Golden Sunland and its brand, the Little Rice Company. We are perhaps the only commercial rice producer from Singapore working with the smallholder farmers in Myanmar. And the business philosophy is largely built on the concept of empathy by bringing the producers and the consumers closer together. So actually, very much similar to what Palmi is trying to do with Jazzberry. The overall business model and even business philosophy, I believe they are very aligned. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think I can agree with you, like this shedding a spotlight onto the rice industry or the rice as a product, apart from just the consumption, I think is very necessary and needed. And we are very happy to have you both here to share your experiences and insights from that field. You mentioned already like a business model and business practices. So that would be, it's a good lead off for my second question. Maybe you would like to start with that, David. My question is, what are the most challenging aspects of running sustainable business in regard to the financial bottom line, and how do you manage them, especially in regard to your specific field you operate in? And if you want to share some practical examples from your experience, please feel free to do so.
Okay, so I guess the way I would like to take on this question is to, first of all, identify and acknowledge the fact that Golden Sunland is a startup. So part of the operation of a startup, other than the actual operation, fundraising is actually a key thing that we do all the time. So we are a certified B Corp like Jasberry, and we believe in the fundamental principles of balancing profit with purpose. But the most challenging part about running a startup with this sort of mentality is actually the definition of sustainability, as Dr. Ang and Sam has shared in the very beginning. To a certain extent, even the measure of impact from investors' lens, they're not very well defined. So as a startup who's consistently fundraising, sometimes we do suffer from a little bit of identity crisis. And a lot of time we were forced to create new narratives to suit the investor's mandate. So for me, that's actually the toughest part about running Golden Sunland. It's not that we downplay our operation. I always thought that Golden Sunland sustainability is really about common sense. But how do you translate this sort of mindset so that the investors believe in you, understand in you, and most of all, give them the assurance that not only they are investing in a company that's sustainable, environmentally, socially, but also financially as well. So I guess today, Golden Sunland, we are more comfortable in our own skin. And when it comes to fundraising, we've taken on a more strategic approach when we seek investors.
From your experience, can you share like one hook, so to say, when talking to investors? What was something which worked for you in bringing them on board, convincing them that the sustainability perspective is actually worthwhile, not only in the short term, but mid and long term?
To be honest, it's a very tough journey because at the end of the day, the rice industry is still considered fairly traditional. So I believe someone did ask a question about long-term impact. So we're still at a model where the return of investment specific to the rice industry is already long as it is. But if you tack on the sustainability label, that means driving the farmers towards more environmental friendly cultivation methods and such, it may extend the return of investment period. But one thing that we have also learned is there are different ways to position ourselves. And sometimes going straight on to talk about farmers' welfare, environmental welfare might not necessarily be a good thing. And we kind of need to balance out a little bit between profit and purpose as all the time. So one of the good examples of how we communicate with the investor, when it comes to sustainable production and cultivation method, water management is actually key in rice. And since the flooding of the field is also a key reason why there are a lot of methane emissions from the rice field. So when it comes to communicating with the investors, sometimes we'll let them know that, look, if we are able to nudge the farmers towards better water management, there might be additional revenue stream from the likes of carbon credit trading and such. So it is really about helping the investors understand sustainability, not just from an ESG perspective, but I guess the financial upside is still fairly important. right? Because nobody want to invest in a money-losing business, and if a business could not sustain itself, then obviously it could not sustain the impact.
Thank you very much for that insightful answer. Pami, how is it for you for Jazzberry? What is the most challenging aspect of running a sustainable business in regard to the financial bottom line, and how do you manage it?
Okay, so I think the most challenging thing is to compete with the conventional, traditional agriculture business out there, while keeping the core of why we started the business in the first place, which is to create a social impact. So for me, to keep this social enterprise alive so far, I think we have been working to be better at two things. First is innovation, and second is marketing, because social enterprise like us, we have higher costs compared to conventional business due to our works with the farmers or to the communities that we work with. Some of the things that David also mentioned earlier, water management, like cultivation method, all the trainings that we had to do with the farmers, the conventional business, they didn't have to do that. So we need to be able to add values through innovation and be able to communicate those values through effective marketing. And since we are social enterprise, we don't have much marketing budget. For example, like our Jazzberry rice is an innovation from decades of research through non-GMO method. But even though it's like whole grain brown rice, it's surprisingly soft and delicious. But even though we have like this great product, but a consumer would not know if we do not have like marketing, effective communication, like marketing campaigns. So one of the channels that we use, we have to be a little bit more creative, is we sell our products through gift sets, selling as like corporate gift sets, where the margins are higher. And we don't have to pay listing fees like in the supermarkets. And we are also like doing organic gift set every year, that helping the communities that affected by like problems around the country. And in terms of like the target market, we have been focusing on the export market, like in Europe and the USA, where the values of the product that we offer, like the health and social benefits of helping the farmers get out of poverty, match with the consumers' values there more than in Thailand or Southeast Asia region, where people don't really care much about the lives of people who grow their food, right? Or where the food are coming from. They usually care about more how much they pay for the rice. So to summarize my points, I think as a social enterprise, we need to be more creative and be better in the ways that we do business. Otherwise, we will not survive the intense competition, especially in this agriculture sector.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great leeway also to like adapting a more positive centristic view now for the next question. And I would like to start with you, Pami, again here. What was the most rewarding impact of adopting sustainability at your core aspects of your business from a personal and from a business point of view? And maybe you can share some experience report, if you will.
Okay, so in terms of business impact, I would like to expand more on Sam's point earlier, where he touched on, like the team and culture, human resources, because I think all SMEs have very hard time retain talents to help the company grow. But I think in terms of team and culture, we are able to attract great people because we have a clear purpose beyond just purely making money. And in this case, helping farmers out poverty and transforming consumers' health. And when we have a clear purpose like this, which is inspirational and meaningful, I think we're able to attract highly driven people who want to make a difference in the world, although it's very hard to find them. And we don't have to spend time doing like CSR projects like other normal businesses. Because everything that they do every day is already part of helping the communities that we're working with. And the team, can see the development in the communities in the long run. And that became like a real drive in the work that they do every day. And from my personal standpoint, I think we go through a lot of difficulties emotionally and physically in agriculture sector, rice is very heavy. And by having a clear purpose of helping others, I think this brings us a lot of happiness and fulfillment, which give us like energy and determination to succeed in the long run. Like business is like a marathon and not a sprint. So I think having sustainability as a core aspect of our business really do help a lot. And it's been 10 years since I started the business. If you ask me this question like 5 years ago, I would be like giving examples of how I had seen the impacts we created with the farmers and how the farmers' life had changes over time. But recently, like the recent few years, I started to see people who have worked with us for a few years, our ex-employees, our interns, or the students who may give lecture to, or those who came across our company just for a short conversation. Those who have enough skill and experience now started their own social enterprises and do more for the societies. So I just feel like to be able to inspire others, the younger generation, to care more about the societies and take action in their own way, I think this is the most rewarding thing that I've been experiencing since I first started the business.
Thank you very much for that answer. David, how about you? On a personal and business level, what do you think are the most impactful and rewarding factors of adapting like the sustainability focus or view, basically?
I have to delete everything I wanted to say because Palmi said everything. So I'm going with something new. But I think first, maybe allow me to define what sustainability means for Golden Sunland. And just now I briefly mentioned, I really like to think that our concept of sustainability is really about common sense, because we sell rice and the farmers produce rice. So if the farmers stop producing due to various reasons, then we will suffer, right? So the relationship is actually quite as simple as that. So people think that we are sustainable because we have taken an inclusive approach towards the farmers. But I will argue that it makes no sense to take advantage of the farmers and directly endanger our supply chain. So our definition of sustainability is really like what Dr. Ang and Sam has described. It's the ability to keep moving forward and bring everyone on a journey with us. So at a very personal level, that there was this incident, honestly, it was a small win for me and it was very rewarding. There was a farmer whom we have worked with for more than 1 year. So at the beginning of every season, we will kind of discuss the price for the produce, right? And after 1 year of working together with us, this farmer started bargaining with us. It is a small win because imagine a farmer in the Delta region of Myanmar going on to Lazada in Singapore, found our product, and he took his phone and said, "This is how much you're selling your product. Why are you paying me this amount?" This is a win because in the past, farmers in developing nations, especially Myanmar, they would take whatever price the buyers offer them because they always feel like they have no bargaining power and they have no rights. So this event really opened up opportunities for changes because we talk about systemic changes just now, and systemic change can really only occur when there's courage to demand and also a desire to be better than yesterday. So it's counterintuitive for business when someone tries to bargain a higher price from you, but from a personal perspective, this is really a small win. We are really about driving big systemic changes so that the industry can move forward together as a whole and not leave anyone behind.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to connect this statement with a question from Armin Bauer he just sent in. He mentioned something about the idea of land to you, David. And it's about, in broader terms, it's about innovation in the business. So can you talk a little bit about what does innovation in the business sector of rice mean to you? What is this idea of land? And yeah, he's mentioning also a company doing credit rating for farmers. And this is something I think the ag tech sector is quite into, and it's quite hot at the moment. So if you, yeah.
So I think it's no secret that the ag tech sector has really grew, right? Investments are being poured into ag tech. But I would argue that if you look at what the farmers are doing on the ground, some of the current practices are still fairly traditional. And a lot of time it's not because the farmers do not understand the benefit of innovation. Most of the time for rice farmers, it's the matter of fact that there lacks accessibility to these technologies. So for example, I will use Jazzberry as an example. Jazzberry inculcate sustainable practices, organic practices by the farmers, and Jazzberry is willing to pay the farmers a premium for it, or a fairer price. So that is the sort of nudge to push the farmers to a sustainable practice. But in a broader perspective in the rice industry, a farmer who's willing to move towards more sustainable cultivation method actually is not being rewarded at the end. So the whole efficacy of innovation is actually tied to farmers' ability to link to finance resources. That's one, and also linkage to market. So that's the first point. And this will bring us to the second point. Armin pointed out land. The Green Revolution and Industrial Revolution has created estate size farms in the western part of the world. So when you look at a tractor in say Germany, Italy, each of these tractors is probably the size of a rice field in Southeast Asia. They're huge tractors. So when lands are not structured in a way that is suitable for big machineries to improve its efficiency, naturally a smallholder rice farmer's operation in Southeast Asia, or rather in Asia, is not as efficient. They're not as cost efficient. But if you look at the investment scene today, if we were to go to an investor and say, hey, could I raise some money from you to restructure the farmer's land into big plots so that we could introduce mechanization and more efficient equipment? The answer is likely to be no. Right. So when it comes to introducing innovation, when you meet with a problem like that, if we choose to go head on and we keep looking for money to do infrastructure change like this, it will never happen. So the best way to go around it is to do what we call a soft collectivization, where you try to bring the farmers all together, work in a collective. Not only is more cost effective, it is also better for the plant because you are in a better position to plan a cultivation, to make sure that everyone is using sustainable cultivation methods. And this will really uplift everyone. And you turn all these smallholder farmers into shareholders instead, something like that, right? So don't take the land from them, because you'll be called a land grabber, that's for sure. But empower them to be more efficient, empower them to work together, and empower them to take charge of their own future.
Thank you. How about you, Palmi? How do you encounter innovation?
So like for the work I've been doing, like similar to David, the problem that he faced is the landscape of Southeast Asia is totally different. So, all our farmers are small scale. Their plots of land are so small, you cannot even put machineries in there. So those kind of machinery you have to forget about it. So what we do is we find out like case by case what the farmers are really lacking. First of all, like the financing that they were lacking. So we work with like NGOs overseas, like to give them like financing options without collateral, because all their lands have been like been financed with the bank, but they need like extra financing for their seeds and those fertilizers. So we connect them with those financing options. And like for the farmers, we ask them like what will help them to have like more earning during the period of growing the rice. So we also give them like loans to purchase cows, so that like cows for the farmers are actually like savings. So, each cows are like the most expensive item on their land. So for them to be able to purchase more cows, that's like additional income for them. And when the cows give birth to another cattle. So that's like another additional incomes for them. And also we also invest in like an app in collecting organic farmers input. Because in organic certification process, our field officer had to use a lot of papers to collect data. So that's very inefficient. So we invested in this app for the farmers to do like input of their inputs that they invested in the fields, and that will help to calculate the earnings and the return that they earn in that sense. Yeah.
So we recently had two co-founders in the fireside chat, also helping farmers grow organic produce, not rice, other produces. And I learned that blockchain technology was used basically in tracking their origins and also being able to show the customer in the end where the crop has been grown and under what circumstances, like that. Which to me was a little bit mind-blowing, because blockchain technology for me was more in the fintech sector or in the smart contract sector established than in the agriculture sector. This is quite pushing the edge, I think. There are other companies in the rice business like Recode. I don't know if you're familiar with Recode, which uses data imaging, satellite imaging to project for crop forecasts, so to say, and pairs that with financial vehicles to enable farmers to grow their crops. Where do you see the industry going to in the future?
So we've been in talk with Recode from time to time. So we've been getting updates from them. But I think that's like we all have to adopt like technology in the ways that will help our farmers, you know, that will not change the way that they want to live, but will improve the efficiency of the business in the future. So we'll see how we can go from here. Yeah.
I think I'll follow up on that. Pami made a great point that you have to communicate with the farmer, and I just want to remind everyone that there's a reason why we talk about agriculture and not agri-tech, because culture needs to come first. So while innovations are exciting, technologies are exciting, there are certain cultural nuances that we need to take care of. So for example, a farmer in Myanmar, they are many decades away from technology and innovation. When I first got to Myanmar, maybe about 5-6 years ago, a tractor is a new scene, right? And farmers, some of them still prefer to use their buffaloes in the field. So if you make such a big leap, right? So from getting to know a tractor, suddenly you want to talk about blockchain and different things like that. It's too much for them to absorb. So when it comes to agriculture, the progress should not be for the sake of progress. It always has to work hand in hand with the people, the culture, and progress is incremental. So while blockchain, traceability, these are all hype now, but what we really need to work on is the consumer's knowledge with regards to the produce that they are consuming. Adding on blockchain as a traceability component to rice is great, but it also means at a cost. Rice is staple for half the global population, and most of the consumers of rice are mid-income and below. We also have to, systemic thinking wise, we also need to take into consideration whether this population is able to afford rice at a much higher price point. So while technology is all good, the cultural aspect is really far more important in the agriculture sector.
Thank you very much. As a last question, I wanted to open the floor for you guys. If you have a question for the other one, or if there's something you would like to highlight, which we haven't talked about yet before we go into the Q&A. That's okay. We have questions in the Q&A, so why don't we Welcome back to the panel, Sander. Hi, Sander.
Hello.
Dr. Ang, if you would like to join, please feel free to. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for those insightful panels on the respective topics. I would like to start off with a question from Rudy, which we tabled earlier, which is, while some SMEs understand that investment is needed now to be sustainable in the long run, many SMEs can't afford to wait such long payback periods. What are the sustainable funding options for SMEs now? Maybe, Dr. Ang, that's a question for you, or Sander, or yeah.
Maybe I can just start with by saying that you know, the it being a long-term thing, right? The effort is also a long-term, or a investment, right? It's a long-term thing. You just don't go to an investor and say, look, you know, I'm adopting sustainable practices and therefore give me money. I guess the realistic way is actually show effort, show traction. It's just like any startup or any company, right? Wanting funding. And I think that's really the good way to start. I mean, you need to kind of put in the effort, put in the money, right? And then show people that you need more money in order to make this work even better. I think that's really a right way of looking at it. Right. Sander, any question?
Yeah, I might just add something that Sam actually mentioned at the beginning, is that while yes, there are investment requirements and there is a long-term investment horizon, there are early, maybe short-term costs that you can save as well in approaching this kind of a process. So it's looking at how you can, you know, it's not cutting corners, but it's about trying to find ways in which you can use this type of a mentality or this type of an approach to reduce some of the resource costs that you have, to maybe also fill your innovation pipeline with alternatives or things that you might want to put out in the market that, you know, subscribe to this process, and then therefore in the long term actually gain. So it could be earlier than you think. I think there are wins to find earlier in the process than you think there are.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Harry. It says, Dr. Ang correctly pointed out many SMEs are encouraged to adopt government-led sustainability initiatives. As a green tech venture builder, I see many firms take shortcuts, one-off PR-centric approaches. Let's have a farm on a roof. Let's grow green to absorb CO2. Let's invest in urban fishing farms, but they don't compute the net carbon footprint. So how do you steer companies to think and act holistically and reach the systemic stage, as Mr. Sander pointed out, on a practical level?
I guess I'll take this for a shot. This is a great question, really a great question, because I feel the pain. Basically, I share that pain that you're expressing right now. I work a lot with social entrepreneurs, a lot with startups, but also those further down the line. And we see similar sort of quick shoot from the hip reactions. A lot of social entrepreneurs who feel that they might understand a problem deeply, but then actually are only tackling a symptomatic effect of that problem and not actually the root cause of the issue, and ultimately might actually be doing more harm to a system or other systems than good. So there's really a lot of danger, so to speak, in this kind of a from the hip mentality, or let's define sustainability as CSR, a little individual initiatives. I think it depends, to answer your question, it depends on your role. If you're talking from your role as sort of this venture creator, and you already have these kinds of conversations with organizations, then you've got your foot in the door to start pushing their mindset towards systemic concepts. So you can make them more aware of their role in larger systems or cross-scale systems. If you don't have that foot in the door, if your role is as an observer or a client or a customer, then to move this forward, you've got general sort of activism, pressuring advocacy, governments, getting basically the pressure on for other institutions to put that kind of pressure on these companies to realize that they're part of these bigger socio-ecological systems. Because if they don't realize it, trust me, they're going to figure it out themselves when their factory burns down from something that flew over from somewhere else. Or, the oceans will teach them the lesson they need to learn at some point. So, if it's not an external effort, it's going to be from you. But I think, just to cut the answer short now, the next step, once you get your foot in the door and once you've made them aware of their role, is to set a vision, get the commitment. And that's something that David mentioned, something about courage, is you need to have the organizations believe to some extent, obviously, in what this means. They have to be behind it, because otherwise it's just empty and they won't be willing to change the structures and mindsets and the cultures within their company. So setting that vision and getting the leaders of these organizations behind that is key to getting them to move towards what you'd like them to see.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think it captures it quite well. And courage definitely is one of the key factors if you want to drive change. I think it's not easy and it takes courage for sure. A new thing, the next question from Daniel targets is the SGX, and I think it's quite interesting. He asks, is it a requirement for SGX listed companies to provide sustainability? And if I may add on to this after, I don't know, Sandra, you're probably familiar with the 3 scopes of carbon emission, which I learned recently about and I find quite interesting. So maybe we answer Daniel's question first and then we can have a look into the 3 scopes of carbon emissions. So the question is it a requirement for SGX listed companies to provide for sustainability? Dr. Ang, do you have any insight on that?
I don't think specifically at the moment. I think what I've just seen, in fact, this afternoon, I've seen the SEC trying to push towards having some sustainable disclosure. And if that happens, right, it's a matter of time that the rest of the world, taking lead from the US, right, would actually be adopting it. Actually, besides the US, I think the more the area that's actually bigger on ESG and sustainability is actually Europe. European EU itself is actually very progressive in this respect. And again, like I said, the tipping point, and it's a matter of time, right, before these sustainability requirements get to become formalized. But I think rather than wait for a directive, right, I think it's a good practice to be proactive, right, and actually practice it before it even becomes a regulation, so that you're actually more in control, right? Because when the marching order comes, right, you then have to react, and you'll be at the receiving end, right, rather than being able to kind of drive a lot of these things.
Yeah, thank you. Sandra, do you want to talk a little bit about the 3 scopes of carbon emission? I mean, putting that onto you, but just because it broadened my horizon when I learned about it, how impact measurements are to be done, actually, if you truly for it.
Yeah, I think maybe in the context of this question, so about the SGX, a lot of exchanges and a lot of investment companies obviously are looking at these kinds of metrics, ESG metrics and so forth. And there are exchanges that will not allow you to list if you don't meet certain standards. But when it comes to things like measurement, that is exceptionally difficult to do. And that's also ties into what Harry was saying earlier in his question, the net carbon footprint. And that I think that's what you're referring to with the 3 scope, Raphael, is that it's easier to measure your immediate circle of impact. It's easier to measure in terms of something that's a material stock or flow. It's easier to measure, you know, something that's moving, that has a tangible, there's a tangible material asset that you can check over time. What's less easy to do is the second and the third ring, you know, the more indirect impacts that you're having in terms of carbon footprint, for example, or carbon emissions. What are your suppliers? What are their carbon emissions? What else is happening in the rest of your value chain internationally in terms of carbon emissions? So looking at further into these scopes becomes more difficult to do, but is becoming increasingly required. I think there's maybe the catch, you know. A lot of companies that go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll measure what I do, and you know, I'll put it out there, and then we're good with it. But a lot of these institutions, like Dr. Ong was saying, for example, in Europe, a lot of funding bodies, a lot of institutions that are going to be the backbone of your clients, or of your value chains, of the money that's coming in, basically, are going to be saying, you need to check this in your entire value chain before we know whether we want to do business with you. It's the same with, you know, child labor, for example, right? These are things that have already started that you already need to account for when you work in those fields. So that's just going to start to happen in multiple socioeconomic factors and metrics as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's very interesting, the developments on that. And I think for everybody in the audience, companies are issuing huge statements like Unilever or Apple or others saying they want to be carbon neutral by a certain date, but it does not, the question is, how do they define it in terms of the electricity use of Apple devices when charging, for example? Where does it come from? How can they offset that? Or a Unilever cleaning and household products, how do they ensure, for example, clean water and sanitation for that? So it's interesting to know about this concept of the three scopes, like Sander pointed out, the first one being direct emissions, second, indirect electricity emissions, and the third one is the value chain. Maybe something to look further into if you're interested in adapting sustainability practices for your business. And yeah.
Well, just want to add in that Dr. Bauer actually wrote something on SGX. So just so.
Please. So Dr. Bauer, thank you for attending our workshop today, and we're looking forward to talking to you more further down the line in one of the next ones. He mentioned that SGX there's a special part of this, it's a special part of the Singaporean Stock Exchange on sustainable business that is promoted by, I am not familiar with how to pronounce the name, RRX, and impact investment firm in Singapore. Yeah. Yeah, so he also asked another question for you, Pami. You said that you are in a social business, and David mentioned that Golden Sunland is an inclusive business. Is it because of revenue scale, or what are your opportunities to grow revenue? Or are you at the limit of what the 2,500 farmers you are currently working with?
I think, just to be clear, I think Sanders also mentioned before, social business is also just, you know, like a normal business, but the core that we do, it's just, you know, we have like a real social impact that we work with, the farmers that we work with. I think the numbers right now that we are limited with 2,500 farmers, we started off the journey with less than 100. And we have kept the number 2,500 for the past 2 years because we feel, I think there's also COVID, but this year we are increasing numbers of farmers as well. We're expanding into the North region as well, not only the Northeast, but I don't have the final number yet. We'll find out like in a couple of months, the number that we expand to. So that's the goal that we are growing the business with. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone. That was the last question we have so far. I would like to invite.
So, Raphael, can I also share with the participants that sustainability ESG is actually a series of not only in business, right? But because we're a business school, we train business leaders. The accreditation bodies, AACSB and AQUIS, right, are very, very much looking out for evidence, right, that we are teaching ESG and sustainability stuff. So from next year onwards, right, I told all my instructors in the MBA program, right, I need to see evidence, right, of materials that you're using to teach ESG or to highlight ESG, so that we will have a whole generation, right, of new business leaders that are trained with that mindset. So imagine, right, how many people will be out there, right, with that kind of mindset. And it's really a network effect, right, that we're going to build as we go along. Okay, and this is just at the tip of the iceberg. Okay.
Dr. Ang, may I add a line to that?
Please,
so,
please.
you know, I really look forward to a day where we don't need to label the difference between business, social enterprise, or whatsoever, right? All this concept about ESG, it should have been built in as part of the corporate DNA, right? It is just how business should have been run. It is common sense.
It's what Sam said, right? It's a natural course of business, and it shouldn't be, you know, it's part of the DNA, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Sorry, I'd like to also add just a line on that thought process, that, you know, something that we tend to overlook often when we talk about is because we talk about entrepreneurship. But what we tend to overlook often is intrapreneurship. And what Dr. Ang is saying is that there's going to be many more people, many more graduates out there working for companies who are going to have this mindset. And there's a strong role for intrapreneurship within companies as well on this systems or social ecological front. So if you're looking to find ways to progress that agenda within your company, look for those people within your company also who have that mindset, who have come from that, who are the entrepreneurs, who are willing to take those risks and, you know, give them the resources they need to start pursuing these opportunities within your company. That's one of the easiest, quickest ways in which you can start to move towards this type of a sustainability approach to your business.
If I may add on to here, because this is actually something very interesting and very important what Sandra just mentioned, the entrepreneurship route, because you essentially you can create with going down this sustainability route, you can create risk resilience. You can create multiple long-term beneficial factors for the bigger company without having the risk of a startup. And you can do short validation cycles. So you don't need a lot of capital. You don't need a lot of resources to spend. It's more testing and adapting, basically, your findings, which then can help transform your bigger business. Especially in terms of succession, I think Dr. Ang will join me on this, that bringing in new generations or younger generations into the core business could actually be quite beneficial through entrepreneurship in value creating activities like incorporating sustainability. Thank you very much. I think we had a very, very fruitful and insightful day today. Vera, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, it's indeed very insightful. I think my personal take back from especially David and Pami's sharing is really about innovation in this very traditional rice farming industry. It's really innovation in this case is actually through a very humanistic approach, simply being empowering the farmers and having that respect for each other, for collective growth and development. So thank you so much for all this. And I hope this inspires all of us here to do something, to start something together in this journey. All right. Okay. So just bear with us for another 2 minutes. Okay. It's a quick one. So as mentioned during the start of the session, today is the first of a 4-part series that we are doing. There are 3 more sessions coming your way, and with the final one being a by invitation only session. So please do keep a lookout for the various registration details coming through your emails. And finally, before we end, we would like to invite you to do a short feedback for us. Your gift will surely help us bring on board relevant topics that resonate with your learning needs. So please take a screenshot or do your QR scanning. You see the little dinosaur there? Yeah. please help us to do a QR code and do the feedback for us. And thank you so much once again on behalf of Sasin SEC and UOB SMU AEI. We thank you for joining us today. We'd like to also thank all the panelists, all the panel different speakers for giving us your time and sharing all the nice stories and the journey that you have. So have a good weekend, everyone. We will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.